Welcome to the Simply for Life podcast. I'm Bethany Gettis, your host, a former diet and health nurse turned certified holistic nutritional consultant with over 16 years of experience in the health and wellness space. So I'm here with Bruce Sweeney, Simply for Life founder and integrative nutritionist with over 30 years of expertise. Join us on the Simply for Life journey as we explore nutrition, hormonal balancing, and well-being for a healthier, longer life. So welcome to the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Bethany. Very happy to be here and actually very excited. And I mean this, I was feeling kind of excited this morning, first thing, getting up. So I know you're a couple hours apart. So how you doing in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, pretty good. It's like I said to you before we kind of got on the show, it's not been very cold here, which is kind of strange for us as we are in February, but I'm kind of liking it. So enjoying it.
No complaints. And one thing I say, we're a day closer to spring this time of year. So all
Yeah.
good. It's all good.
It's interesting to hear the birds chirping in February. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah, you were saying this. It's kind of weird, especially this month. And it's your birthday month on top of that. So
Yeah.
special month, eh?
Yeah. So today we're actually going to be talking about something that is true to both of us. And what we do is balancing hormones through nutrition. So I'd like to kind of ask you sort of how you're finding this in showing up day to day with clients. What are you seeing?
Well, first and foremost, I want to tell everybody I promise to make this as simple as possible. I've been known to dive in a little bit too deep sometimes, and you use terminology that your audience, your clients are not understanding. So we're going to use all kinds of baby steps for everybody to understand. First and foremost, this kind of start happening more the last 4 or 5 years, and I think we're seeing more predominant complaints, clients being foggy, not feeling good, low energy, having issues sleeping, cortisol level. We're starting to talk more about this, symptoms of cortisol levels. But prior to that, I was more in tune of estrogen, progesterone's ratio, balance, low testosterone. It seemed to be a little bit more simple. We're talking about 20 years ago, Bethany.
Okay.
We didn't have the wealth of knowledge as we have today, and we didn't really see how nutrition can be an infrastructure to help recalibrate your endocrine system. But move forward now, what we've seen that more and more people are binge watching TV, Netflix, we're more on our blue apps or on our cell phone, we're moving less, and we're highly influenced by the food industry. So it seems like we have a perfect storm right now that has the ability to really tax our endocrine system. And at the same time, what I'm seeing, not to get too technical, is that there's many advocates out there, and they're all good, but I think that many advice are conflicting and many advice are confusing too. So
Yeah.
how can we go at the base and the foundation of nutrition to have a really positive influence on your hormones and how you feel, right?
hmm Definitely. I've noticed that massively too, especially the last several years. There has been a lot more inflammation, which leads up to all the hormone issues that people are having. And a lot of it honestly comes from stress, even during, when everybody was sort of in the lockdown mode. I was noticing at the grocery store, a lot of people were filling up on a lot of packaged processed foods, just very stressed in general. And what I noticed was a lot of people were eating a lot more processed junk food. I think because it was trying to quell that fear, anxiety, and like you said, the cortisol levels. A lot of people were feeling very like chronically stressed, but now we're kind of seeing it sort of going into that chronic inflammation, unfortunately. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. What are some common signs that you're sort of seeing in females versus males with hormone imbalances right now?
Well, first and foremost, I think females are at the forefront. They're always questioning. They've always been in tune with themselves. Some of the boys, right, they might be living with their normal symptoms. They don't know the difference. But with female, definitely what I've been seeing, of course, low energy, constipation, hair loss, but brain fog,
Right.
having the ability to not retain information, feeling overwhelmed, anxiety, of course, we hear it. Low energy. That's something that Bruce, I feel low energy from upon rising in the morning all day long.
Mhm.
Losing sex drive, of course,
Yeah.
loss of libido, all those. But for me, from the East Coast here, what I've been hearing more is that I'm low energy, I'm foggy, don't have the ability to retain information, a little bit more overwhelmed and anxious. The male, they seem to come over when, of course, they have constipation. They don't see the correlation yet, but low libido, low sex drive, low energy. Do
Right.
you know what I think we're not talking enough right now for both male and female? And I want to point out there's many other advocates out there. They have the tools like you and I have, and they might use different tools, but they're getting their patients or clients from point A to point B, and fantastic. But one thing that we're not talking about, and again, I want to point that out. I think there's too much labeling in our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at our adult population, we're starting to lose muscle mass at a much faster rate than ever before.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think skeletal muscle mass should be looked at the organ of longevity.
Yeah.
Because from my way of thinking is that when you're engaged, and I'm not talking about being a bodybuilder having muscle mass,
Mm-hmm.
but we're in a society we're labeling skinny fat. We shouldn't be talking about skinny fat, but we're seeing more and more people because our lifestyle, lack of sleep, lack of proper good nutrition and
Yeah.
exercise. And we're not doing the right type of exercise. And I want to be clear, all exercise are good. I'm a big fanatic of walking. I think walking is the best exercise in the world. But we need to address more specific kind of weight bearing, a little bit more intensity exercise, resistant training to stimulate the fast twitch muscle fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at, and I'm sure you're on board with this, and you've seen, some of our seniors right now, because of poor muscle mass, bone density, they end up injuring yourself. The prevalence of lifestyle and longevity within 2 years after, it's kind of scary when you look at those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we're not talking about is that both when it comes to having issues with the right integrity of managing your hormones, we're not looking also into muscle mass.
Right.
Because when you focus on muscle mass, it's good for brain health. It's good for giving the right pulsation of growth hormones from your secreting growth hormone to release to your pituitary, luteinizing, folliciding, SETH that talks your whether your adrenals. It's a perfect symphony. So exercising should become a new platform of looking at how we can manage our hormones and how can we marry this right with the right nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I really think
that was another question I sort of had for you, is like discussing the role of exercise, because we're talking versus male versus female, but are there specific nutritional recommendations to actually complement different types of exercise and workouts? And like you said, I find myself as well, a lot of clients are very geared towards weight loss, so they go to cardio machines and things like that, and they lose so much muscle mass, whereas weight bearing exercises, like using a little bit of weights increasing, a lot of the times there's a lot of misinformation, especially for women, around weight training. And it's, I don't want to get bulky, I don't want to look like a man, like all this stuff. And they think
yeah.
overnight, within lifting like 15, 20 pounds, they're going to look like, this big muscly person that's on like stage doing competitions, right? And that's not true. But like you said, the muscle is so important, because what we also see, I've seen a lot of seniors, is injuries, going for surgery, a lot of pain, and because they don't have that muscle integrity. So in terms of dispelling, I guess, those myths around the weight bearing and everything, and using a little bit of weight, especially for women leading into menopause and things like that, I know this one massively in nutrition is that they're lacking protein. So kind of
That's huge.
give me some information on that, in terms of, that is usually what I see, is this lack of protein, lack of weight bearing exercise. So it's all cardio, and you can understand why people become that skinny fat quote.
Yeah, and I think we're in a good place right now because I come from the school of sugar was your enemy, and I'm talking about refined sugar, so forth, so on.
Right.
And then fruits, you couldn't touch fruits because they have sugars. Now we're accepting back fruits. I think we need to have a better conversation about what is a whole food diet, eating food the way nature to be, having a complement of good quality protein, fats, and carbohydrates, whether it's 3 meals per day, 2 snacks, no snacks, everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality, I'm a big fan, of suggesting 1 gram of protein per lean body weight. So for example, lean body weight, let's just say, Bethany, you'd be 300 pounds, but we would estimate at 22, 26% body fat, you would be X body weight. That's what I would use as a template. And I don't make it military. I don't make it that if you don't have 1 gram of lean, could be 0.8 grams.
Yeah.
I've always used that number from day one before we knew to study, because I was a fan of protein intake. And the right ratio of fats. I think we can all agree on that, and the right type of carbs. But to come back to your question, I think that we're making nutrition very complicated right now because there's many voices. If you look at ketogenic diet, if you do ketogenic diet versus Simply for Life, you'll lose much faster in Simply for Life. But over time, it affects your thyroid, can affect your other hormones. And I've always said, do you really want to mortgage your health to weight loss?
Yeah.
But again, for me, I've always been a fan of losing 3/4 pounds to a pound per week. One of my really good friends, we're really good friends, we travel. He's totally like, Bruce, it's too slow. No, you got to lose as fast as you can because we need to remove you out of that inflammatory state.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yes, but your client keeps bouncing back and forth, back and forth. I like steady, slowly, consistent. So exercise, I think, is probably something that we need to have a discussion. And science is telling us weight bearing or resistance training 3 to 4 times per week. Could be 20 to 30 minutes. But one thing that really stuck with me, and whether it was Peter Attia, I'm not too sure who it was, but I was like, yes, finally somebody's mentioning it. Many times you'll see, for example, people going to the gym. And again, I'm not talking about muscle building, but for the benefits of muscle integrity. And they'll do 10 reps of a dumbbell, and they're done at 10. You should always feel a little stressed that you cannot get to 10, you're only doing 9, and then you build up. Once you have 10, you increase by weight by 10 pounds or 5 pounds, so forth. Has to have that resistance and a little bit of stress. And I think cardio too should be done 2-3 times per week, right? Long duration or short duration is a big debate right now because I've seen some of my clients, their cortisol is super high. So then I decrease the amount, and then until their cortisol is back in sync, they love to run. They love to do. So for me, 2 questions I'm asked. When is the best time to exercise, Bruce? I always say, I exercise in the morning, exercise when it's best for you. And what's the best type of exercise? The number one exercise is the best type, the one that you'll enjoy. It usually takes quite some time. And if you don't enjoy exercise, do it for the longevity, the improving your quality of life. So definitely, I don't think after the age of 45, you can preserve or build muscle mass unless you do 3 to 4 times per week. The once or twice per week, just not going to cut it. Bethany, I've researched the Blue Zone, all of them except Okinawa and Japan, okay? And I've actually went there, lived with farmers, then went there just for a day, multiple times. Down there, they don't need Simply for Life, and they don't need a fitness club because they've preserved their traditional ways of eating, for number one. And most of all, beyond socializing, so forth, they do functional activities. They walk 20,000 steps per day. Sometimes they have to store wood. They do physical labor that actually works on the fast twitch muscle fiber. So they have something that's much more profound than you and I. Okay, we have to invest our time at the gym today. Then we got to go for a walk. It's already integrated. And from a nutrition standpoint, I think there's a couple of things we forget to mention. We're always talking about, yes, maybe we should eat organic. I'm a big fan of 2 websites. The EWJ Environment Working Group, right? I'm a big fan of suggesting my clients the Dirty Dozens. Because as you know, we eat with our own eyes. We're buying berries now in Canada, comes from Peru, California. It's 5-6 weeks old, and it's laced with herbicide, pesticide, which are endocrine disruptors. We know this. They basically mimic our hormones, or they will actually alter the natural process of our hormones. So many nutritionists will say, well, there's not a whole lot of nutritional difference between an organic strawberry and conventional. True, but there's pesticide. And I've always used that analogy. I agree. I don't smoke. I really don't smoke. and I'm not saying this to be arrogant, but if today I would start smoking for the next 30 days, unless I'm super bad lucky, I don't feel I would have any lung problems. But if I smoke for 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
that's where issue happens.
Right.
And in our food right now system, of course, we don't have to eat organic all the time. But also another website I'm a big fan is Beyond Pesticide. They have all kinds of information. It's peer reviewed, non-influentials. And the second thing we need to discuss about, because we're talking about protein right now, is the quality of our protein. You
Yeah.
know, right now, our animal in Canada, we don't have any hormones, but the industry start to flirt around with protein peptides, selective androgen receptor modulators. They're using this,
Mm-hmm.
not as much. But when you look at our beef right now, there's over 21 chemicals and drugs in our beef when you consume that.
Yep.
So when, not to name them, if you're going to big box stores and we're buying animal protein, it's sick protein.
Yeah.
Because our animals, we've been saying this. I remember I was a member of the Western A. Price Foundation. I'm still a big advocate. It's all about traditional ways of farming. But even 20 years ago and 30 years ago, we knew that a cow is supposed to graze on grass, not on grain.
Yeah.
Then over time, they get fatter,
Right.
and I get the farmer better price point, so forth, so on. But they need to use medication because the animal, the last 6 weeks, is very sick
Thick. Yeah.
before it gets. And we're buying this at a fair price, but we're paying the cost with our health. We're
Right.
seeing the consequence over time. And third thing we need to discuss is we talk about food, but how we cook our food.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're using microplastic to conserve our food more than anything right now.
Yeah.
We're drinking water from our bottle. One bottle, not going to hurt us, but over time it will.
Mm-hmm.
And we're cooking with those, we cook only with cast iron, home, and stainless steel. We cook with Teflon. And over time, again, this disintegrates and gets in our body and disrupt our endocrine system, right?
Yeah.
We're missing those signaling patterns, that basically messaging patterns from one hormones to carry on message. So we have to look at food and make it more simple. There's a benefit when people comes to see you and me, because as much it's overloading information, we can
Mm-hmm.
simplify to one's need. But one thing I would always say to my clients, I will say, all right, Bethany, how many Teflon pans you have? Depending on the budget of my clients, I said, here's what I recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you storing your food in? Are you storing Ziploc? Are you storing Tupperwares? There's food you can still store, but don't recook with it in microwave. But if
Yeah.
you're going to store pasta sauce, anything acidic, it leaches out. And now we're just tipping the scale, but there's more and more evidence coming up on microplastic. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And can we change the world, you and I, today? No. But what we have and we possess, you and I, is give our clients the ability to restore and protect their health.
Right.
We have all those tools. And like I say, I have clients sometimes that, as much I'm saying 2 times a week is not enough to do weight-bearing exercise, but they hate it. So I finally got them to do a little bit of resistant exercise. Is it the best I can produce for this client? And then I have clients that will join the gym, go there 6 times per week.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if you deploy nutrition and exercise, it's a perfect marriage, because if you have a good foundation of good sleep with that, manage your stress, so forth, so on,
Mm-hmm.
then your endocrine system start giving the right pulsation and you start feeling better. And you're seeing the difference right from the get-go.
That's very true. You had a lot of things in there for sure. So I know you mentioned about like the keto thing first. So I actually used to work in a ketogenic diet industry. So I learned basically what not to do. So everything that you were saying, and I know you were mentioning your friends sort of like, well, it's not fast enough. I hear that all the time. And I think a lot of people aren't really aware that what got you to the dance, it took you 10 plus years to kind of get that chronic inflammation that you have. And a lot of people are wanting the quick fix pill. Or like the exercise too is like, I just want to look like this, but yet you've got all of this stuff leading up to it. So I usually explain that first is like what got you here took a really long time. So you can't sort of expect the same thing. And the other part I was noticing with what you were talking about is the enjoyment of either the food itself. Can you stick to something that is so rigid, that is fast? Maybe it's going to give you the results fast, but how many times I saw people 95% of the time go back to the same weight or even heavier because it was so fast. They learned nothing. They didn't understand themselves and understand the psychology of the food itself. The slower the pace is usually the best way to go, because you're actually learning and keeping those long-term lifestyle skills for yourself. The other one you mentioned about was the physical aspect of working out, finding something that works well for you. Even if it's something that you don't really enjoy physically to do, a lot of people are stressed out, need mental health help. And I find a lot of the times just moving your body is helping that too, because it's circulating that blood around. And a lot of people, most of the time when you ask them when they've done the exercise, how do you feel? I feel great. Most people feel that way, right? So
Yeah.
what are some things that clients are actually missing in terms of balancing their hormones with nutrition? Like I think you mentioned about the plastics, like that's something super simple, but what do you find that's sort of a commonality when you're talking to people?
Yeah. Well, number one, and everybody's looking for that superfood, and then you can choose some superfood. But before that, there's two ingredients I always tell my clients: stop shaming yourself
Mm-hmm.
and start loving yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you'll do that, I remember when I used to practice way back, Bethany, and some of the guys, they were like, stiffen up. I said, listen, you got to start loving yourself. You love yourself. You're more in tune with yourself. Take a break from yourself over the weekend. They
Yeah.
didn't connect with this, and people are starting to appreciate that. But for example, not to get too technical, but I think we're lacking omega-3 fats, right?
Yeah.
We're no longer eating wild fish like we used to. We eat farm raised fish. Not to get too technical about the coloring agent they're using, the antibiotics, but we need a better ratio of omega-3 to 6. There's nothing wrong with omega-6, but we're out ratioing it
Yeah.
20 to 1, 21 to 1, depending on the expert you ask. If you look at grain-fed beef, for example, the ratio is 19 to 1, omega-6 to 1. And when you have grazed cows that are grass finished, the ratio is 3 to 1, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
significant. So we need more omega-3 fats in our diet. When it comes to, as far as for food, Walter Willett said it many years ago as a researcher at Harvard Medical School. You got to have different type of colors in your food. You got to
Yeah.
have different variety of food, because they all have kind of the ability to intermingle together. To get to the point, we've seen them. We have those clients that are very regimented, type A personality,
Mm-hmm.
want to go to point A to point B. They eat the same lame diet,
Yeah.
and it doesn't cover all the nutritional gaps. And we need to influence our palate too when we eat. It needs to be delicious, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's two groups. We have the groups that they're still not fully adopting that you can have a really well balance of carbohydrates, protein, and fats. And there's a group that the two groups. One have an issue with carbs, one have an issue with fats, right?
Yeah.
They all complement each other. But also we're lacking vitamin D3. It's huge. It's huge what it does for our hormones. We're lacking also magnesium because we're stressed. We drink too much coffee. Coffee is good for you. We drink too much wine. We take medication, and we don't sleep well. Plus, the environment is causing us to deplete magnesium. So can we include more chocolate in our diet? Absolutely. There's food. If you look at seeds and nuts, they're
Mm-hmm.
actually amazing what it can do for your body. And again, I'm emphasizing it. That's the benefit of working with individuals like you and I,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we have clients that just don't like seeds or don't like any nuts, right? Where do we complement those very important nutrients that they're part of our healthy lifestyle? Another thing too, I think that's missing that we're not talking enough is, we're talking about proteins right now, but salt. We need salt to reduce
We're
break down
talking about
protein.
sea salt, right?
Sea
Yeah.
salt. I'm a fan of Himalayan salt if you can get it right from the mountain of Himalayan. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, I think it's the EWR. Yeah, it's the environmental group. There's a really nice published article because some of the sea salt we're getting starting to have a lot of trace of environmental contaminants,
Mm-hmm.
lead, cadmium, mercury, so forth, so on. And Himalayan salt, not that it's a superfood, if it comes from the mountains of Himalayas, doesn't have any environment contaminants. Now,
Mhm.
there's people in their field arguing it has 81 trace minerals or 82. Trace minerals are very important, but let's look back at sodium. We've been told to go low sodium for many years.
Mhm.
Number one thing I do when I have a client who have issues with hypertension, hormones, I put them on the right level of potassium and sodium. And to educate the physicians here locally, which I have a good relationship with them now, not in the
Mhm.
past,
Yeah.
because they didn't like what I was doing. I would say, okay, well, Bethany, when you go see your doctor, tell him I'm getting you to take a teaspoon of Himalayan salt per day in your shaker, put that to your food. They would say he's crazy. But then ask your doctor how much sodium I should be consuming per day. Well, 1600, 1900 milligram per day. Okay. Well, in my health plan at Simplify Life, I got about 300, and a teaspoon of Himalayan is about 1300. So I'm still at 1600. So I'm good, right?
Mhm.
You wouldn't know how to answer that. But that is to educate also our clients to understand that we have wonderful physicians and not to attack them, but they're totally derailed when it comes to nutritional advice.
Yeah.
And I think an ingredients that we're not looking for thyroid function, for your adrenal, for
Yeah.
cortisol, for help your body being more efficient with when you have excess estrogens. Make sure it does not have that tremendous impact on your sex hormone binding globulin. There's many other things that it does, right? For
Right.
constipation. So salt is one missing ingredient that we need to have more conversations. We could talk about fruits and vegetables. There's all kinds of superfood up there. We can talk about great quality protein, but where is the salt and spice after that?
Right. It sounds like it's the misinformation. So like I know what you were saying kind of when someone comes to me and they say like, "Well, I'm not allowed to have sodium, no salt on my diet." But they're talking more about what the doctor said in terms of table salt. This is like processed stuff that's, table salt that is used. So just clearing that up for people because sea salt like iodine is for thyroid and all that. And the one that you're talking about as well from the mountains, like they all have different aspects that will help your body. And I don't think a lot of people understand because they conglomerate everything into sort of like one place. And same with the carbohydrates, the protein, all that stuff. So I think there's so much information out there and a lot of people are confused.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're coming sort of saying like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to have salt, so why are you putting salt?" But it's the education behind what type. Same with carbohydrates. I find so many people like there's never a lack in carbohydrates on someone's regular like what they're eating, and there's usually a lack in protein, and sometimes it could be an aversion to it, whether it's a child or somebody that doesn't really like meat. But you have to find alternatives that they will enjoy. So I think it's kind of making it customized to them and educating them on like what is really going on. Um, let's go this direction now. So what would happen if someone didn't take care of their hormonal health and just let these problems continue?
They're not going to get any better. And Bethany, I think you know this hands on from your background. You know what? We're looking at cardiovascular disease, we're looking at dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson's
Diabetes.
disease, diabetes, cancer, I mean, all
Yeah.
form of cancer. And the reality is that you become imprisoned in your body.
Yeah.
From morning till night, you feel like, excuse language, crap.
Yeah.
It's not a way to live. And don't get me wrong, I take good care of myself. I have a heart conditions. I always in tune myself. But I got days that I have, not as much energy. But the bulk of the time, I feel good. I don't know what it is to need to take a nap in the afternoon. When I say this, I really don't know. I'm not Superman, but I love the feeling of feeling good.
Yeah.
And I've always said this to my clients, instead of chasing the scale, chase a feeling of feeling good. You're more likely to get back on your feet by chasing a feeling of feeling good. So you're having a deliberating lifestyle. We
Hmm.
have the right to have a good quality of life and feel good. And if you don't manage your hormones, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse
Yeah.
because we're supposed to age gracefully. And that's totally the opposite.
Yeah.
We're less resilient, right?
Yeah, I noticed this especially I kind of get to that age group of sort of the 40, 50 plus and it's like I want to be able to be hanging around my grandkids and play with them and I have like no energy and again like you said like your body is becoming so sluggish because of years and years of whatever you've been doing. whether that's lack of education or just the way you've kind of grown up and eaten.
Yep.
I find that there's a lot of like tapes around childhood eating, all that kind of stuff that we bring into our adult way of eating. And then we teach it to our next generation. And then we're kind of wondering why our kids are sort of having similar problems, right? With that, what are there specific foods or patterns with food that you can positively do to actually impact hormone health? Are there like they're usually common dietary mistakes that people are making like unknowingly, and that's affecting their hormones too. And I think what you said, even just about the plastics, most people are like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, okay, I'm going to pick on a lot of people today. They might not like this because I'm still a big fan of intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
But fasting or calorie restriction, going too low body fat is a recipe for disaster if you have issues with your hormone, especially if you're not in tune with nutrition or exercise. Crash dieting, it's a big no-no. I cannot emphasize enough, and of course, eating refined carbohydrates, not knowing where your food is coming from, not understanding how to read labels. You know, one of the gifts that you and I can provide our clients is giving them the eyesight and the tools to understand how to read your labels instead of checking how many calories, how many grams of carbs and sugar. Because once you understand what the ingredient you're consuming, everything changed, because there's some ingredients that basically will rob you, take away, deplete you. And there's some ingredient actually will give you the nourishing that you need to have and to function in an optimal level, right? So one thing that everybody don't see is, to come back to our conversation, trying to lose weight too fast does cause issue to your endocrine system. There's no ifs or buts. Some will feel it less, some will feel it more. And as much as many advocate of intermittent fasting, again, some experts are saying you shouldn't do it more than 36 hours now, because you start losing muscle mass after 36 hours, right? But I think just skipping meals generally can have a very negative effect, right? So being consistent, good stable breakfast. We've been having breakfast since ancient time, a good lunch and a good supper. Now, if you don't want to have snacks, it's fine. If you want to have a snack, it's good. The idea of coming back now to managing your blood glucose. We're starting to see more and more, because it's funny when you look at insulin, beyond it drives amino acids, protein, but we all know that it drives glucose into the cell. But if you have too much cortisol is like the troublemaker. It's like, okay, let's take it out the cell, right? So in that roller coaster up and down, people are wondering why they cannot manage their appetite. They're eating carbs all the time. So it's a roller coaster you're getting into.
I would ask you just on the intermittent fasting, because I know this is a thing right now for a lot of people, and they're like, oh, but I'm losing weight. And yeah, because you're not eating, right? So of course you're not going to like gain weight, right? I would hope you wouldn't be gaining weight while you're intermittent fasting. But in the role of sort of insulin resistance, which we're seeing a lot more of, pre-diabetes, all that, a lot of people are saying sort of like intermittent fasting, like clear that up for me.
Well, there's two groups. There's the group right now that when they're doing intermittent fasting, they're seeing their blood glucose drop, right? Those individuals, I'm talking from my point of view of experience here. And I'm sure there's advocate will tell you totally different story. But what I'm seeing is that here, these group that are 12, 14 blood glucose, they're still not really in tune with managing blood glucose. They're just starting to use a little bit of insulin, or it's metformin and so forth, so on. They see a significant drop. And for that, their correlation is like, this is working. It's really good for me. But what they're not seeing is pretty much like, not going to put, but there's a new drug out there causes massive weight loss. But this drug is a peptide. And as you know, it's causing a huge amount of muscle loss. We're starting to see having issues with people having bowels issues. It's significantly slows the transit time. So again, at the beginning, I was say, and it might not really answer your questions, but I think we're mortgaging our health for weight loss. Because if we can shift our thinking into looking into our health in a holistic approach, as opposed to chasing the scale, because in North America, we want you to chase a scale.
Yeah.
chase the scale, you're doing good, but you're caught in that roller coaster. You never get out of it. And intermittent fasting, I think beyond the glucose and diabetes, it shows great significant impact on reducing inflammation.
Hmm.
Some people have reversed chronic disease with this. There's significant healthy, and
Right.
whether it's center cells or you're talking to the people to the longevity club, or people are all about lifespan. But when you look from an endocrine output, it's not as promising as we talked to. There's no ifs or
Right.
buts.
What I noticed as well, especially working in that diet industry and stuff, and listening to some clients that have kind of been those chronic perpetual dieters, they will use intermittent fasting as another tool in their toolkit, but it's messing emotionally with them where they're binge
Oh,
eating one side and then fasting, and it's like this repetitive, and then that's causing all the endocrine disruptions and inflammation and all of that stuff, like to go without eating and then all of a sudden to feeling super deprived mentally around food, that you gorge on something that, really coming out of a fast shouldn't be something that's significant, in terms of like unhealthy fats and calories and all that kind of stuff. I think I've noticed a lot of people are abusing it, unfortunately, and not using it for the health benefits like you just talked about. So I think that's where I notice a huge problem. And that's where usually when I talk to clients, if I hear sort of the verbiage of dieting and stuff, I usually stay away from anything in terms of intermittent fasting, because it gets into this black and white, all or nothing thinking. And it perpetuates them back into this dieting mentality, which is, it can be very dangerous if you've kind of already had that black and white thinking in the first place.
yeah. And then I'll say something. You might have noticed this too, but there's a trend in a circle, pretty much like designer clothing, so forth, so on. Every 7 years, some seem to come, whether it's ketogenic. Ketogenic
Yeah.
was in the 70s, Atkins. And
Yeah.
then the intermittent fasting, I remember when I had my fitness club, happened at the same time, early 90s. And then it shift into volumetric eating,
Yeah. I've heard
because,
about this.
oh yeah, well, it was crazy. Buffet plays were getting all the people doing it because it would go like this. It's an intermittent fasting, but you're choosing to eat as healthy as you can, one big meal as much as you can. Some would eat nonstop for an hour, but that would last only 2 or 3 meals, and then they're not attacking any business at the Chinese buffet.
Yeah.
Or we
Yeah.
had a lot of buffet plays back in the 90s, and people loved it because they would, excuse my language, pig out.
Yeah.
You eat as much as you can.
Yeah.
There's no way you can tell me there's any value to this. Right? There's no
Yeah.
way you can tell me that your digest system saying, "Oh, great, thanks for overstuffing me
Yeah.
right now with all this crap."
Yeah.
So it's just funny that intermittent fasting, the last 4 years, we've been heavy on it, and
Mhm.
now, at the same coincidence as many years ago,
The
volumetric eating
yeah.
is coming in, right? Because it's kind of matching. I don't know, but it's it's sad because there's many experts, they're doing intermittent fasting very well. They have a way with words, and the
Mhm.
signs are saying it's true. But we have to look deeper under the hood, right?
Mhm.
And intermittent fasting, for me, I'm not saying it's a no. If you want to manage your hormones, it's not the way to go.
Yeah. That's great. So, with all this information, what could somebody do as sort of a starting point? Say they've listened to this and they're like, "Oh my goodness, like I feel like I'm using all the wrong things. I'm probably eating all the wrong foods. I've been fasting, I've been doing this, like I've been doing everything that's basically not something that's really helpful to my hormones." How would you set a client up to start to be educated around this?
Yeah. Well, the rule of 1% is like taking one little thing and starting with this. Just the fact our audience listening to us right now, one thing for sure, Bethany, how many times you and I have played detective? We're
Mhm.
trying to figure things out. Expedite your progress by doing proper testing.
Mhm.
I know most physicians want honor for you to do a full scale
Yeah.
testing on your hormones. I'm a big fan because it will save you 2, 3, or 4 years. Because we can all agree that if you look at symptoms as low estrogen or low cortisol or high cortisol or high sex hormone binding globulin or conversion of T4 to T3, a lot of symptoms are, if you Google, are the same.
Yeah, they
So
are.
you're going to treat your thyroid? Are we going to treat your sex hormone binding globulin? Is it our estrogen ratio, or is it your testosterone, or is it your DHEA? So do the testing, because you can have precise education and align you at a much faster rate in the direction you want to go. I cannot stand this. And I'm a big fan of ZRT testing because it's
Mhm.
easy. You can do it right home. Uh, you can pinch, will guide you every step of the way. You usually get back your results within 2 to 3 weeks at the very latest. You know, here in New Brunswick right now in the Maritimes, by the time you book an appointment with your doctor, it takes 4 to 5 weeks.
Mhm.
If he approves, by the time you get your blood lab, it could take 3 to 4 months. So you're 5 to 6 months, and most of the times they just do the basic labs, right? At
Right, yeah.
best, they'll do your TSH. They won't do a reverse T3 or T4 or thyroid antibody, anything as such.
Mhm.
So yeah, test. Number one thing, don't mess around. Invest in yourself. Learn to say, I'm investing in myself so I can align myself to go the right directions, because I could drive to Calgary today, but I could go throughout the states. I could make many pit stops. But if you give me the right direction, I'm going to save time to get to Calgary, and I'm not paying excess gas. I'm not stopping in a restaurant and a hotel. So
Mhm.
testing is the way to go.
That's great. So I think it's giving people information is key, and your own personal hormone testing kit. So this is something where we'll leave the link to the hormone testing kit in the show notes, and you guys can actually be in contact with Bruce and he can go through the whole report with you. Getting a report is obviously very overwhelming, so you want to have all that information and all the directions so you actually can have a plan to move forward. So we'll leave that in there. So thank you, Bruce, for sharing your words of wisdom today. Very knowledgeable. I love it. And
Thank you.
then don't forget to share this episode with your family and friends, and stay tuned for more on the Simply for Life journey. And good health, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank Bethany. Appreciate it. Have a great day.